These are the veritable records of the Joseon dynasty. It consists of 888 books, and no one could read it for 500 years. The Joseon dynasty was the royal family that ruled over Korea for 5 centuries, and these records are an amalgamation of each ruler's reign. And when I say amalgamation, I mean amalgamation, as in every action, every event that happened in the royal court was written down by officials who were the ancient equivalent of STTs. And at this point you may be wondering, why did the court of Joseon pour all this effort into writing this? The answer to this question is actually closely related to the spirit of Joseon itself. Joseon was a nation founded on Confucian ideals. In Confucianism, much weight is put on history. But still, it seems like a pretty big leap from I love history to human STT. Well, my friend, I'm glad you asked. I didn't. Confucianism had a fascinating effect on Joseon's I'll just save this for another video. So let's talk about the crazies who actually made this happen. These guys were called sagwan, or diary historians. Their job was basically following the king around the whole day and recording, often verbatim, every action and word that caught their attention. Their job must have been pretty exhausting as it required them to be full-time stalkers, sometimes even getting drawn out by the king himself. One of the more famous or just fanatic sagwan was a guy called Min In-seng. He served like third king of Joseon Taejong. This guy knew no bounds when stalking the king. When the king protested, he resorted to spying behind screens and sneaking around with his face obscured. As a result, he pops up often in the Silok. Here is a particularly famous episode. He rode with a bow and arrow and shot a roe deer. But while doing so, he fell off the horse due to the horse's collapse. However, he did not come to any harm. Looking left and right, he said, "Don't let the sagwan know." Just for a little perspective, Taejong came to power after murdering 3 of his brothers. Even after his ascension to the throne, he had a ruthless way of managing his court and was not someone to be messed with. Apparently, Min In-seng didn't get the memo, and he hounded Taejong so badly that the first thing he thought of after a painful tumble of his horse was making sure that Min In-seng never got a whiff of the incident. Of course, Min In-seng did, and he wrote it down along with the orders not to write it down so that people like us, 500 years later, can have a good chuckle over it. It is actually one of the most popular searches on Shillok.com. The saddest thing is that Taejong probably never knew the incident got recorded, as the Shillok was off limits to even the king. Though I guess ignorance is bliss. Actually, this wasn't the first or last time Taejong had a run-in with Min In-seng. He is mentioned several more times in the Silok, including the record that says he was eventually exiled for overstepping one too many times. He died in exile, though he makes a surprise appearance 11 years after his exile in the records when Taejong speaks of his untoward behavior. I mean, bringing him up over a decade later, that's just PTSD. After all this effort into making these records, it is understandable that the Joseon dynasty protected them at all costs. At first, there were these 4 recorded storages, or had the same copies of the records, so basically 1 and 3 backups. And please remember that they had to hand print all of these books. Considering all the risk pain from that copying, 4 copies may seem a bit overzealous. But it turns out 4 was the magic number, as 3 went up in flames during the Japanese invasion in 1592. The surviving copies were whisked off by these 2 committed guys called Ani and Songo. The records ended up flaying 8 times throughout the war. No easy feat, as it is estimated that 20 horses were needed to move them. Now let's talk about the records themselves. What makes the Joseon Wangjosil look different from its counterparts in other countries is its straight and narrow ways. Here are some of the ground rules. No one could ever read it, not even the king, especially not the king, because letting them have a sneak peek could result in an order to change the accounts, which was of course a big no-no in the truth department. Plus, some of these kings just went and killed everyone when they read something they didn't like. There were revisions after times of chaos. Politics are messy, and a powerful man could warp the records. Sometimes the records seem decidedly biased a few decades later. Hey, just wait a second. How do you know that new guys aren't the biased ones? Are there even people who are free of bias? Okay, calm down people. Here's the simple, yet kinda deep part. The Saguan, after some debate, decide to leave both versions. They decide that we descendants could make our interpretations in our own time. So, every time we read and study the Silog, it's like we're shaping history together, connected even though centuries apart. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this story about Korea's Joseon Wangjo Silog.